We left off the last video getting our user info view controller all set up. We're passing the data, and where we left off is we have this blank view controller that's scrolling up. You see the done button at the top, and we've passed our data, being just the username of the user that we tapped. So in this video, we're going to work on setting up the network call that's going to take that user and pull down the user object in our model. And then in future videos, we're going to populate the UI that you see here with that information, but one step at a time. Let's get into this network call. Now remember, we've already set up our model. We did that a few videos ago here with our user object, right? So this is what we're going to pull in. While we're here, I want to address a slight oversight on my part, and admittedly, a bad habit that I do sometimes. Not all of these have to be vars, right? Some of them can be lets. So the example that can be a var are these optionals, right? Because those can be nil. Those have to be a var. Another example of when they would be a variable is if, say we were changing the login. Like say this was a fully featured GitHub app, you'd pull down the user data. The user would have the ability to change their login name, and then maybe send up a post request to change that, etc. Obviously, our app doesn't do that, but that's just an example of when you would keep it a var. But for our app, we're just getting the data and showing the data. The user can't alter any of the data. So in this case, these should be lets. Right? So actually we'll show off some keyboard shortcuts too. If you hold down Option and scroll down, you can do the vertical highlight and just type let. So basically anything that's not an optional, we're going to make a let. So let, there you go. And again, do that keyboard shortcut, hold down Option and then just drag down to get your cursor, and you can do that. So anyway, that was a quick little optimization that was an oversight on my part, thanks to a viewer that pointed that out. So I wanted to address that real quick. But this is the model that we're going to be pulling in. Remember, we already set that up. We looked at the GitHub API and pulled those in an earlier video. So we want to set up our network call. So let's go to our network manager. And our network call is going to be very, very similar to this get followers. For example, all this error handling right here, let error, let response, let data, right? That's the same code. The only thing that's going to change a little bit is, we're going to be parsing our user instead of an array of followers. So we're going to be able to copy and paste this. So we have our get followers function. Let's copy that down here. And by the way, this is also why, because there's a lot of boilerplate and redundant code, this is why things like, Alamofire exist, or some people write their own networking wrappers that they refactor. I'm teaching it this way for educational purposes, because I know this course is targeted at people that are just learning development and trying to get ready for their very first interview, right? That's who it's targeted at. And I feel that in that situation as a junior developer, it's best for you to know this long way to see everything that's happening, in my opinion, right? I compared it to learning long division before you learn how to do the shorthand stuff. So I think understanding, you get the data back, you get the response back, you get the error, you got to parse all that. I think understanding that is important for, again, the people just learning on their own, trying to get that first job. So just keep that in mind that, this is very refactorable, but we're going to keep it this way because I feel like this is the important information. Knowing what's going on is key. So anyway, like I said, we're going to copy, paste, and reuse a lot of this code. Be very, very careful of copying and pasting, right? We just copied and pasted a lot. And I've said this before in the course, copy paste errors are a thing, but I don't think you wanted to watch me retype out all this stuff. So this title is going to be different. It's going to be get user info for username, still good. We're not going to need a page, so we can delete that parameter. Completed, still. Add escaping, I'll explain that in a second. Once we get this network call working, I'll come back and explain add escaping, because I said I was going to do it in the previous video and it slipped my mind during the video, so we're going to come back to that. So same thing, result type, except we're no longer returning an array of followers, we're returning our user type. Okay, so that's different. Now our endpoint is going to be different. So it's not base URL plus username followers per page, right? That's long. So let's find the URL. And in order to do that, we got to go to the GitHub documentation. So again, scroll down to users and get a single user, right? That's what we're looking for. So it's just /users, and then you pass in the user name. You see that right here. And then again, remember we went over this, right? These are all the stuff we're going to get back. We've already parsed out what we want, but what we came to the docs for is to make sure we had the right URL. So back to Xcode. So really this is just this first part, right? We're already passing in the username from the followers one. So it's going to be base URL, which again, remember is this up here, this github.com/users. And then remember the URL again was just /users, and then you throw in the username. So our endpoint here is just the base URL, and then add the username to the end of it. So we're good there. Guardlet URL equal URL, same code. Data task, same code. Remember I just said all these errors, same code. So again, let decoder, we want the same decoding strategy. So now we're not going to do let followers, we're going to do let user equal, and then instead of this being an array of followers.self, it's going to be user.self. We're decoding it from the data. And then remember our result type, we're going to pass in completed success. And instead of followers, we're going to pass in our singular user. And then the catch case is the same in validata. And then again, make sure you do task.resume. So you'll actually run into this with network calls, even if you did refactor it, even if you used Alamo Fire. Like, okay, we have 2 network calls in our app, right? Like a lot of the projects I've worked on have 20 different like types of network calls between post requests, get requests, updates, all this stuff. So no matter what, no matter how well refactored my network calls have been, like even in like the Luna app and everything like that, using Alamo Fire, there's still a lot of copying and pasting. Like anytime I need a new network call, it's just like, oh, this one's a post request. All right, let me go to my other post request, copy, paste, change a little bit of code. So to some degree, repeated code in your network calls is kind of unavoidable, just to give you that context. But this, again, this is the long division version. This can definitely be refactored. But yeah, like I said, don't want to go down the road before. We're keeping it this way. So our network call is done, provided we didn't have any copy paste errors. Let's test this just to make sure this is good to go, and then I'll come back and explain at escaping. So we need to stop running that. We need to go to the user info VC. And then again, here in just view to load for now, we're gonna fix this. Network, let's do a command B to make sure we get the autocomplete since we just built that network call. Network manager dot shared dot get user info. So we got the autocomplete there. For string is gonna be the username that we pass in. The completed, we're just gonna get a result. And I don't like these parentheses. And again, I've said this before, but I want to keep beating the dead horse. Little things like that, like stylistic or maybe optimizing some things, slight optimizations. There's going to be a whole section of the course at the end where we go back over this project, just like you would if you were turning it in. We're going to go over the project and kind of like proofread it, update things, fix things, because that's the natural flow of how this is going to go if you're actually taking an interview project. So the result gets back. And right, we have 2 cases. If you remember our result type, right? We have the success case and the failure case. So we want to do switch. Let's do this because we know we're going to have to do this eventually. Do this now so we don't forget it later. Remember the weak self, because that'll come into play in my at escaping explanation too. So we'll do this too. Guard let self equals self else return, our good old all Swift keyword line. So now we need to do our result. Parse that out with a switch statement. So switch result. And it's going to be case success. And then the user, let user. And we're just going to print user dot, what's something that we know they're going to get back that we haven't got. Let's just print out the user. Like that'll print off the whole thing, I'm pretty sure. And then case. Well, let's do this too. So if you're not familiar with like switch statements, switch must be exhaustive. So that's a good thing too. So when you hit this, it's going to add all your missing cases, which was failure, right? We saw that. And then failure is going to be error. And just break for now. Again, we're going to come back and actually do this later when we come back to the screen, but we want to just test to make sure this works. Oh, I got to do let. All right, and these warnings are just saying like, I'd never use self, so why'd you define it? We're going to use self. And then immutable value error was never used. We're going to use it. In fact, like, again, errors annoy me. Let's just do this real quick. Sorry. Self.present GF alert on main thread. Remember, it's the same stuff we used before. Something went wrong. The error message is going to be error.raw value. And button title is just going to be OK. All right, so like I said, we're going to come back and clean this up, but really I just want to make sure like we can print the user. I think this will print the whole object. If not, we'll go back and print like one of the properties. So SALEN 0400, get followers, tap on a name there. All right, let's look in our printout here. Okay, yeah, so it's not neatly formatted, but you have the their login, avatar URL, you see public repos, public GIS, created at date. You see some optional stuff that we'll have to parse out when we actually do this. You can see they're following followers. My head might be blocking it. So we have our user. So our network call is working correctly. And that's all we wanted to do for this video, is to make sure that network call was working. In future videos, when we actually start working on this user info VC, we're going to refactor this, make the network call look pretty. But again, I like to talk about the process, right? Get it working first, then go back and make it pretty, refactored, nice, clean code. At least that's how I work anyway. I feel like trying to create the nice, clean, perfect code prematurely often leads to headaches. My experience, maybe you have a different one. So before we finish off this video with explaining at escaping, one other little fix I want to do here in our utilities, error message. Remember we changed the name of error message to gferror? Well, now it's changed in our comments. Our file name is not right. I'm going to show you a habit I have. I will be the first to say this may be unnecessary, but I always do it to be safe, because sometimes when I just change the name here, like if I were to just do error message, oh, let's just change this to gferror, and then maybe change it up here in the comment. It really is the file name. I have run into pathing issues when I just change a file name or something like that. I don't know if I was doing something wrong, but now anytime I want to rename something, I do this just to be 100% sure I'm not going to have any pathing issues. By the way, in the comments, if you have a similar experience or you can correct me if I'm wrong, happy to hear it. But I always play it super safe. I just copy this. I will delete this file. All right, so there's no pathing issues. Move the trash. Utilities, utilities, new file, Swift file. And I know there's a little bit of extra time. Obviously, when I'm not having to explain everything I do, it goes a bit faster. gferror, create, cool, there it is. And then paste that there. And then now I'm good to go. I know there's not gonna be any pathing issues. I've just had it pop up in the past, and it's caused so much headaches that I take the extra 10 seconds, better safe than sorry, my opinion. But again, would love to hear anybody's opinion on that. Genuinely interested to hear. So the last thing, right? Explain escaping here, this nice little keyword, at escaping. What is this? Well, closures are either escaping or non-escaping. But essentially it means almost like what the word says, right? So basically an escaping closure can outlive this function, this getUserInfo function. And this is used for asynchronous stuff, right? So basically what this means is our closure can be called after a period of time. And remember, our closures are called, after the network call, right? After the data task shared happens, right? And if you don't know, once we call this, that goes on a background thread. Sure, if you're on, good Wi-Fi, that could be almost instantaneous. But if you're on crappy internet connection, right? You remember when we tested our bad internet connection, that took forever. So that's why you have to make these closures escaping, because they need to live longer than this function, right? Because we're going to run this function, it's going to throw the data task on a background thread, and then this function is going to be done and out. But again, that closure has to outlive the function. That's why it's called at escaping. And closures are non-escaping by default. Non-escaping means that it doesn't outlive the life of the function, right? And when you do when something escapes it, now you get into memory management where you have to manage its reference count. That's why we have to use the weak self in this closure. So again, escaping just means it can outlive the function that it was created in, in a nutshell. And if you want some more information on that, I have the documentation up here, escaping closures. I will link this into the notes on the video. But yeah, it says a closure is said to escape a function when a closure is passed as an argument to the function, but is called after the function returns. When you declare this, you have to use the at escaping keyword. There's more information, more examples too. And if you want to just read all about closures, this is definitely a good thing too, because I know closures can be confusing. But back to the code. So yeah, that's our network call in a nutshell. Like I said, very, very similar code. But now on our UserInfo VC, we have our user. We got it successfully with our network call. Now it's time to start populating this UI that you see here. But as you can see, this screen's got a lot going on. A lot of child view controllers, a lot of custom views. So the next video, I'm going to talk about the overall big picture plan on how we're going, the strategy behind how we're building this. What's a child view controller? What's going where? Because when I sat down to actually build this, I brainstormed this for a good half hour, 45 minutes on the exact best way, or the best way I thought to build it. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next video.